Oh, child, let me tell you, there are moments in life when time just stops, when a single cruel word hangs in the air so heavy it feels like the whole world goes quiet just to hear it echo. That's what happened at my son's wedding. A day that was supposed to be filled with love and music turned into a storm of shame and disbelief, all because of one young woman's pride. The hall was shining that day. Chandeliers glistened like raindrops frozen in the light. The tables were dressed in white linen, the scent of roses and vanilla cake drifting through the air. The band had just finished playing a soft tune, and folks were smiling, clinking glasses, making small talk about how beautiful the bride looked. And she did look beautiful, Stephanie, my son's bride, tall, graceful, wrapped in lace that shimmered like starlight. I remember sitting there at table 12, way in the back near the service door, the spot they gave me. I didn't mind, or at least I told myself I didn't. You learn to make peace with small slights when you've lived long enough. I was just proud of my boy standing there at the head table, glowing with happiness. Then Stephanie stood up, champagne glass in hand, that perfect smile painted on her face. The room went quiet. Everyone expected one of those sweet little toast brides make you know, full of gratitude and love. But instead, she tilted her chin, glanced my way, and said something that sliced through the air like a blade. I suppose not all families come from the same class. She began, laughing softly, the kind of laugh that doesn't reach the eyes. Some of us were just lucky to be raised with standards. The room gave a nervous chuckle, thinking she was joking, but she wasn't. Her tone grew sharper with every word. My husband's father, for instance. She continued, turning her glass toward me as though I were a story prop, has quite a past. Addiction, wasn't it? It's admirable, of course, when people like that try to change. But let's be honest, ladies and gentlemen, some stains never really wash off, do they? You could have heard a pin drop. The laughter died, the violinist froze mid-tune, even the waiters stopped moving. I sat there, feeling the heat rise to my cheeks, not from guilt, but from the sheer humiliation of it, of being called low class trash by the woman marrying my son. She didn't say those exact words yet, but her eyes, oh, those eyes, they said it for her long before her lips did. My boy, Tommy, looked horrified. Stephanie, he whispered, trying to reach for her arm, but she brushed him off like he was a child interrupting grown-up talk. I'm just saying, she went on, voice sweet as poison, some people claw their way up from the bottom, and others are simply born with grace. It's not anyone's fault, it's just the way the world works. That's when she looked right at me, and with a smile sharp enough to cut glass, she said the words I'll never forget. Some of us come from class, others come from trash. A gasp swept through the hall. One poor soul dropped a fork. Somewhere in the back a woman whispered, "Oh, Lord." I felt my heart twist inside my chest, not because she'd wounded my pride, but because my son stood there between us, eyes wide, torn in half. I could see the shame in him, not for what she said, but for what it revealed. He'd built his love on quicksand. For a moment, I thought about walking out, about leaving that glittering room full of people who didn't know what to do, look at me or look away. But then I remembered the years I'd fought for dignity, the nights I'd spent rebuilding a life after losing everything. I'd come too far to crumble now because of one spoiled girl's cruelty. So I sat there, lifted my water glass, and held my chin high. I didn't say a word, not yet. Sometimes silence is louder than shouting, but inside I made a quiet promise. This woman just showed the world who she truly is, and before this night is over, everyone will see it too. Because the thing about truth, sweetheart, is that it doesn't stay buried. No matter how deep you try to hide it under diamonds and champagne, it always finds its way to the surface. And that night, oh, it surely did. My name's Margaret Brown, and I'm 51 years old. I've been sober for 12 years, clean, clear, and standing on both feet after life tried its best to break me. 12 years ago, I was just another woman clawing her way out of the dark. I'd lost everything that mattered: my husband to cancer, my home to bad choices, and nearly my own soul to a bottle. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed one morning, shaking, praying for a reason to live. And you know what? God must have been listening that day, because he gave me one, my son, Tommy. I promised myself right then that if I ever got a second chance, I'd turn my pain into purpose, and Lord knows I did. See, when you've known rock bottom, you don't forget how cold it feels. You don't forget the faces of the people you meet down there, the ones who just need someone to believe in them again. So, after I got clean, I started small helping women like me in my church basement. No fancy equipment, no money, just coffee, folding chairs, and hope, but word spread. Hope has a way of doing that. Within 5 years, I opened my first recovery center, New Dawn Recovery, right here in Arizona. It wasn't much at first, just one building and a handful of beds, but I worked day and night. I studied, I listened, I learned, and I treated every soul who walked through that door with the same dignity I wanted for myself. Now, 12 years later, we've grown into 8 centers across the state, with over 200 employees and programs that have helped thousands find their footing again. Folks like to call it a $22 million empire, but to me, it's not an empire. It's a sanctuary, one built on tears, grace, and second chances. You know, people hear addict, and they wrinkle their noses like it's a curse word, but addiction doesn't care about class or college degrees or what car you drive. It finds anyone it can, and when you finally crawl out of that pit, you don't come out empty, you come out wise. You come out knowing what really matters. That's what burns me most about Stephanie. The poor child thinks money makes her rich. She looks at me and sees low glass trash, because her idea of class is diamonds and wine glasses with stems. Mine's a bit different. To me, class is showing kindness when you could be cruel. Class is telling the truth when it'd be easier to lie. Class is helping someone else up after you've already made it out. If she'd taken the time to ask about my past instead of gossiping about it, she might have learned something. She might have learned that behind this old dress and these steady hands is a woman who built something real, not for show, not to impress, but to save lives. Every morning, I walk through those recovery center doors and I see people fighting demons I once knew by name. And every time one of them smiles, I remember why I got up off that bed 12 years ago. That's what keeps me going, not money, not status, just purpose. So when that girl stood there at the wedding, dressed head to toe in silk and pride, calling me unworthy, she wasn't just insulting me. She was insulting every person who's ever fought their way back from nothing. She just didn't know it yet. And that's the funny thing about folks like her. They think they are at the top of the mountain, looking down on the rest of us. But sometimes, child, that mountain they're standing on is made of lies. And when the truth finally shakes it, they find out real quick who's been standing on solid ground all along. So yes, I am a recovering addict. But I'm also a mother, a business owner, a woman of faith, and someone who built her life with her own 2 hands. I've seen what rock bottom looks like, and that's exactly why I never bow my head for anyone who's never been there. Because if surviving hell makes me low class, then I'll wear that title with pride. Now, child, every lie eventually starts to smell no matter how much perfume you pour over it. Inasmuch as that girl, Stephanie, wanted to play the part of a high society princess, something about her and her so-called family never quite sat right with me. See, I've lived long enough to know the difference between real grace and pretend polish. Real grace doesn't need to announce itself, but this girl's family, well, they performed their manners like actors reading lines from a script, and wouldn't you know it, that's exactly what they were. It all started a few weeks before the wedding, when my business partner, Dr. Sarah Williams, called me one evening. Sarah's the kind of woman who could spot a lie in a heartbeat. We'd built our recovery centers together from the ground up. She handled the medical side. I handled the people side. When I told her about Stephanie's family, how polished they were, how they never seemed to have a traceable past, she got that quiet tone in her voice that always meant she was already digging for the truth. Margaret, she said over the phone, you might want to sit down. I remember clutching the phone tighter. Sarah, don't you dare tell me it's something about my boy. No, she said softly, it's about her, about that family of hers. The way she said family sent a chill down my spine. What about them? I asked. She took a breath. They don't exist. I blinked, thinking maybe she'd lost her mind. What do you mean they don't exist? I've met them, Sarah. I sat across from them at dinner. Yes, you did, she said. But not who you thought they were. I checked their names, their businesses, even their social media, all fake. Their company, Hartwell Properties, doesn't exist in any registry. Their addresses trace back to temporary rentals, and the big one, their actors, Margaret, every last one of them, hired from a casting agency in Los Angeles. I remember just sitting there, the phone pressed against my ear, trying to take it all in. Actors, paid to play her family for months, Sarah continued, her voice calm but heavy. They were hired by something called S. Morrison Financial Services. You want to guess what the S stands for? I didn't have to, Stephanie, I whispered. That's right. She's been paying these people $1,500 a day each for months. Not just for the wedding, for dinners, photos, family calls, everything. I could feel my heart pounding. So all those stories about her family's business, their properties, their travels, all of it. Every last word, lies. I leaned back in my chair and stared out the window, watching the Arizona sunset bleed gold and purple into the sky. Somewhere out there, my son was getting ready to marry a woman who'd built her entire world out of pretend people. Sarah hesitated before speaking again. There's something else you should know. Lord help me, what now? She's seeing 4 different doctors, prescription painkillers, Adderall, OxyContin. I pulled the state pharmacy report, her name's on the watch list. For a moment, I couldn't even speak. You're saying, yes, Sarah said quietly. She's abusing prescription drugs. The irony, huh? The woman who shamed you for being in recovery is fighting her own addiction. I closed my eyes then, feeling that mix of anger and sorrow only a mother knows. Not because of what she'd done to me, but because my son, my sweet Tommy, had no idea what kind of mess he was marrying into. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I used to pray for strength all those years ago. Only this time I wasn't praying for myself. I was praying for my boy, because lies like that, they don't just ruin reputations. They ruin lives, and I could see it all too clearly. The prescription bottles hidden in her purse, the trembling hands she blamed on wedding stress. The fake smiles that didn't quite reach her eyes. I'd seen those eyes before in the mirror 12 years ago when I was trying to convince everyone I was fine while drowning in shame. Oh, I recognized that darkness all right. She thought she was hiding it behind her diamonds and her fancy words, but addiction doesn't hide well. It leaks out in the shaking, the snappiness, the need to control every little thing. So while the world saw a blushing bride and a wealthy family from California, I saw the truth. I saw a scared, broken girl so desperate to be perfect, she built a whole life out of make, believe, and you know what? My heart almost broke for her, almost, but pity can't fix what pride refuses to admit. So I promised myself right then, in the quiet of that Arizona night, I wasn't going to let my son marry into a lie, no matter how pretty the lie looked in a white dress. You know, I've always believed you can learn everything you need to know about a person in the first 5 minutes. Not from what they say, oh no, words can lie, but from how they look at you. The eyes always tell the truth. That belief was proven right the day I met Stephanie. It was 6 months before the wedding. My son Tommy had just gotten his own place, a sweet little apartment in Scottsdale. Nothing fancy but neat as a pin. He'd invited me for dinner, said he wanted me to meet someone special. I remember smiling to myself as I baked a peach cobbler that morning. My boy had always been shy with women, always the type to choose his words carefully, to listen more than talk. I figured any woman who'd caught his heart must have something truly kind about her. I even stopped by the florist on my way over, picked up a bouquet of soft pink roses. For the lady, I told the girl behind the counter, it's our first meeting. When I got to Tommy's apartment, the smell of something sweet, maybe candle wax or perfume, hung in the air. He opened the door looking a bit nervous, like a schoolboy caught doing something right. "Hey, Mom," he said, giving me that awkward hug grown sons give their mothers when they're trying to seem cool. Come in, come in." And there she was, Stephanie, sitting on the couch, legs crossed, phone in hand, glancing up only when she absolutely had to. Pretty? Lord, yes, she was stunning. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, the kind of beauty that makes a room go quiet for a second. But it was a cold kind of pretty, the kind that looks right through you instead of at you. I walked in, holding out the flowers. Hello, sweetheart. I'm Margaret, Tommy's mom. I brought these for you. She stared at them for half a heartbeat, then actually pulled her hand back, like I'd offered her a handful of dirt. Oh, she said, that one syllable thick with surprise and distaste. You didn't have to. Well, of course I didn't have to. I said, trying to keep my tone light. That's what makes it nice. Tommy shifted uncomfortably beside her. Steph, this is my mom. Mom, this is Stephanie. I smiled, still holding the flowers. She gave me one of those tight, polite smiles that doesn't reach the eyes. Tommy didn't tell me you were coming, she said, glancing around like she wished he hadn't. Well, now you know, I said, setting the bouquet down on the counter myself. It's nice to finally meet you. But it wasn't nice, not really. I could feel the air turn stiff, like walking into a room that hadn't been opened in years. She looked me over from my plain blouse to my work-worn hands. Her gaze stopped at my shoes, not judgment in her eyes, exactly something colder. Pity, maybe. So, she said, folding her arms, Tommy tells me you work in construction. I laughed softly. Close recovery work, actually. I run treatment centers for folks trying to get clean, rebuild their lives. The way her face changed, child, you'd have thought I'd said I collected garbage. Oh, she said again, that same sharp little word. That's admirable, admirable. That's how some people say pathetic when they're trying to sound polite. Thank you. I replied, it's not glamorous, but it's honest work, and it keeps me grateful every day. MMH, she nodded, eyes drifting elsewhere. Well, that's important, I suppose. She said important like it was something you pat a child on the head for. Tommy, bless his heart, tried to bridge the gap. Mom's been running her centers for years, he said proudly. She helped build one of the biggest recovery programs in Arizona. Stephanie gave a little smile that didn't hide the way she was fidgeting with her phone. That's nice. We're all proud of our parents, aren't we? Right then, I knew. That girl didn't see me as a woman who'd rebuilt her life. She saw me as a stain on her idea of perfection. Dinner wasn't much better. She talked mostly about herself, her family, their investments, their vacation home in California. Everything she said glittered, but none of it felt real. When I asked a simple question about her parents' business, she changed the subject faster than a magician hides a coin. When I left that night, Tommy walked me to my car. She's just shy, he said softly, trying to smooth things over. She takes a while to warm up. I kissed his cheek and smiled. Then let's hope she warms up before the wedding, darling. But as I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't cold because she was shy. She was cold because she thought warmth was beneath her. And deep down, I knew the trouble had only just begun. You know, when you've lived a long life, you start to notice the little things most folks overlook, the way people glance, the tone they use when they think you won't catch it, the small silences between words. That's where the truth hides, darling, in the quiet corners, and with Stephanie, the quiet corners started screaming. At first, I tried to convince myself she was just nervous around me. Not everyone knows how to act around a woman who talks openly about recovery. Some folks don't mean harm, they just don't understand it. So I told myself to be patient, but with each visit, her behavior became harder to ignore. The first time I noticed something off was at dinner, just a few weeks after our first meeting. We went to this nice little Italian place, the kind with dim lights and red tablecloths, where the bread comes out warm and the waiters remember your name. I'd brought a small gift, a framed picture of Tommy as a little boy, holding his first fishing rod. I thought it might help us connect, but when I handed it to her, she smiled tightly and placed it face down beside her wine glass. Oh, she said, how quaint. The word stung more than I wanted to admit. Quaint, like my love for my son was some old-fashioned thing you outgrow once you have money. When the check came, I reached for it, as mothers do, but Stephanie was quicker. We'll do separate checks, please, she told the waiter, not even glancing at me. Oh, sweetheart. I laughed, trying to lighten the air. "You don't have to do that. I invited you." "It's fine," she said flatly. "I prefer to handle my own finances." Now, I'm all for independence. Lord knows I built mine from the ashes, but there was something about the way she said it, cold and cutting, like she couldn't risk being seen sharing a bill with me. The waiter hesitated, then split the check in two. I sat there, smiling through it, though it felt like someone had just shut a door in my face. A week later, I visited Tommy's apartment again. He'd asked me to come help with some redecorating. Stephanie was already there, curled up on the couch, scrolling on her phone. When I walked in, she didn't even look up, but what caught my eye was her purse, big, expensive-looking thing sitting beside her on the sofa. The moment I stepped closer to hang my coat, she grabbed it and pulled it into her lap, clutching it tight like I might snatch it and run off. I paused. "You can relax, honey. I'm not going through your things." She gave this brittle little laugh. "Oh, of course not. Force of habit. You know how it is." No, I didn't. After that, I noticed she always kept that purse close. Whether we were at the restaurant, the park, or even their own apartment, she never let it out of her sight, and whenever the topic of my recovery work came up, she'd find the quickest escape hatch. Once during dinner, Tommy proudly mentioned how many people my centers had helped. "Mom saved hundreds of lives," he said with that boyish smile I loved. Stephanie's lips curved, but her eyes didn't match. "That's nice," she said, "but maybe we could talk about something lighter. Recovery topics can be a bit heavy for social meals, don't you think?" "Oh, I don't know," I replied gently. "Life and death seem worth talking about even over pasta." She didn't answer. She just sipped her wine and stared out the window until the conversation changed. And little by little, I began to lose pieces of my son. He used to call me every Sunday. We'd talk about work, his sobriety, and whatever show we were both watching. But after Stephanie came along, those calls started to fade. One Sunday became 2, then 3. When I did hear from him, he sounded distracted, like he was speaking from someone else's living room. "Mom," he said once, his voice hesitant, "maybe you could tone down the recovery stuff when you're around Stephanie. It makes her uncomfortable. Tone down." The very thing that saved both our lives. I looked out my window at that moment, watching the sun dip behind the mountains, and I felt that old ache, the one that comes when you realize someone you love is slipping away. It wasn't just about addiction or money or class. It was about the quiet wall Stephanie was building between my son and me, brick by brick, with smiles and silences, and I could see it forming, clear as day. Still, I kept telling myself maybe it was me, maybe I was being sensitive. Maybe I just didn't understand her kind of world. But in my heart, I knew better. Because when a person truly loves you or your child, they don't make you feel smaller to make themselves look taller. No, child, real love makes room for everyone at the table. And that girl, she was busy pushing out chairs before the meal had even begun. There are moments in life when the truth doesn't shout, it whispers. Soft and sneaky, like a draft slipping through a cracked door, and that's exactly how it came to me, not through confrontation, not through some big scene, but through a single overheard conversation that told me everything I needed to know. It was 3 weeks before the wedding. I had stopped by Tommy's apartment to help him move a few things into storage before the big day. He'd always been sentimental about keeping old things, his childhood trophies, the guitar he never learned to play, boxes full of family photos. We were sorting through them together, just the two of us, laughing like old times. Then Stephanie came home. She swept in like she owned the place, heels clicking, perfume trailing behind her, phone glued to her ear. She didn't even glance at the boxes on the floor or the sweat on our foreheads, just frowned as if our laughter had disrupted something important. "Oh, Mother," she sighed dramatically, "you have no idea how exhausting this all is." I froze. Not because she was on the phone, but because of the tone in her voice, sweet on the surface, but sharp underneath, like honey over glass. I tried not to eavesdrop, I truly did, but her voice carried, and what she said next made my blood run cold. "No, Mother, you don't understand. He has a past." She paused for a moment, listening, then let out a soft, fake little laugh. "Yes, that kind of past, drugs, rehab. The whole story. Oh, I know, but Tommy's attached. There's nothing I can do about it now. I stopped folding the blanket in my hands. Every nerve in my body went still. She was talking about me. Tommy was in the other room, packing up his tools, humming softly, completely unaware. I stood there, heart beating slow and heavy, listening to the poison drip. Mother, please, we'll just have to manage it. I've already arranged the seating chart. He'll be at table 12, yes, near the service entrance, out of the way. The photographer won't even need to get that angle. And if anyone asks, we'll say the front tables were reserved for business partners. Her voice lowered into a whisper, though I could still catch every word. At least we don't have to socialize with him much after the ceremony. Thank God for small mercies. And then she laughed that brittle, artificial laugh that sounds like glass breaking under silk. I can't rightly explain the feeling that washed over me in that moment. It wasn't just anger, it was something deeper, heavier, like standing outside your own house and realizing someone's changed the locks. I'd worked for 12 years to rebuild my life, to earn back respect my own and the world's. And here this girl was, undoing all of it with a few cruel words into a phone. A man with a past, that's what she called me. Child, I could have walked out of that apartment right then, slammed the door and never looked back, but I didn't. I just stood there, quiet as the truth she was too proud to see. When she ended the call, she turned and startled to find me there. Her eyes flickered just for a second with guilt, then she smoothed her dress, lifted her chin, and forced a smile. Oh, Mrs. Brown, I didn't hear you come in, she said. I've been here, I replied softly. Helping Tommy pack. Her hand twitched toward that ever-present purse of hers. Ah, yes, so kind of you to help. Her voice was steady, but I could see her pulse fluttering in her neck. She knew I'd heard. Tommy came back into the room, cheerful and oblivious. Hey, everything okay, just fine, she said quickly, flashing a smile too bright to be real. Your mom was just telling me how excited she is for the wedding. I looked at my boy, his sweet, hopeful face, and swallowed the lump rising in my throat. That's right, I said quietly, excited, but my excitement had turned to ash. That night, I sat in my car for a long time before driving home. The Arizona sunset was fading behind the desert hills, painting the sky in orange and gold, the kind of beauty that almost makes you forget the hurt sitting in your chest. Almost, you see, I could have confronted her. I could have stormed back in there and told Tommy what she'd said, but something stopped me because I wanted proof. I wanted the truth to come out in the open, not through my words, but through her own doing. So I said nothing that night. I just drove home with the windows down and the desert wind brushing my cheeks, thinking how far I'd come and how far that girl still had to fall. And when I reached my driveway, I whispered a quiet promise to myself. They can put me at table 12 near the service door behind the waiters if they like, but when the truth comes knocking, and it will, I'll be sitting right there watching it all unfold. You know, child, a mother's intuition is a funny thing. It doesn't come from gossip or guessing, it comes from something deep in the bones, a quiet tug in the heart that says, something's not right here. And once that feeling starts, it doesn't let go. After that day in Tommy's apartment, when I overheard Stephanie arranging for me to sit at table 12 by the service door, I couldn't shake that unease. It followed me everywhere, in the grocery store aisles, in the quiet of my recovery office, even in my dreams. At first, I tried to brush it off. Maybe I'd misheard. Maybe I was being too sensitive. Lord knows, recovery teaches you to question your emotions. But there's a difference between being paranoid and being perceptive. And this was the latter. See, the thing about truth is it's like sunlight through a crack. Once it starts seeping in, it lights up everything that's been hiding in the shadows. So one evening after dinner, I sat down with my laptop and decided to look into this Hartwell family of hers. The way Stephanie bragged, you'd think they owned half of California. Old money, she said, private business, high connections, all those shiny words that sound impressive until you realize they mean absolutely nothing. I typed their name into Google, Hartwell Properties, California, and nothing. I frowned, tried again. Margaret and Richard Hartwell, California, real estate. Still nothing but a few random results that didn't match. No photos, no company website, no public records. Now, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but even small family businesses have something online these days. A website, a LinkedIn, a newspaper article, something, but for a wealthy family that supposedly owned properties up and down the coast there was nothing, and that silence spoke louder than any answer ever could. I clicked over to social media next. Stephanie's Instagram looked like a showroom, perfect lighting, filtered smiles, endless posts of vacations and brunches, but no real people. No tagged family members, no candid group photos, not even an old birthday post with her parents. Every family picture looked too clean, too posed, like magazine stock images. Then I looked at her mother's Facebook page, the one she'd once shown Tommy, saying, "Mom loves sharing family memories." But that page had only been created 6 months ago. 6 months, and every post had been made within a 2-week window. No comments, no shared memories, just captions like, "So proud of my daughter Stephanie." It was all too perfect, too controlled, like a set built for a play. I felt my stomach twist as I scrolled, and right then a memory came back to me. My late husband used to say, "If something feels staged, it probably is." I leaned back in my chair and looked at the screen, the blue glow lighting up my kitchen. I thought about how easily my boy had been drawn into this illusion because love, bless its heart, can make even the smartest people blind. And I thought about all the little details that suddenly made sense now. The way Stephanie always changed the subject when I asked about her parents' work. How she'd forgotten to introduce me to them over the phone, her strange habit of clutching that purse like it held her whole life inside. Piece by piece, the puzzle was coming together. I picked up my phone and called my business partner, Dr. Sarah Williams. If there's one thing recovery work teaches you, it's how to research people, background checks, family histories, medical verifications, because lives depend on truth. And Sarah, that woman, could find a needle in a haystack blindfolded. When she answered, I said, "Sarah, I need a favor, but it's personal." She didn't ask questions, just said, "Tell me what you've got." I explained what I'd found, or rather, what I hadn't found: the missing records, the fake-looking photos, the made-up business. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'll look into it discreetly. You were right to trust your gut, Margaret. Trust my gut." Those words stayed with me long after we hung up. Because deep down, I already knew what I'd find, or what Sarah would. People who live behind walls of lies always think they're safe, but the truth has a way of cracking those walls wide open. That night, I sat out on my porch with a cup of tea, watching the desert stars flicker above. The air was cool, the world quiet, but my mind wasn't. I thought about my son's sweet, loyal Tommy, and how much he'd fought to rebuild his life after losing his father and facing his own struggles. He'd found love, or at least he thought he had, and now that love was built on sand, and I realized something right then, something sharp, like clarity cutting through fog. This wasn't just about me being disrespected. This was about protecting my son from a woman who wasn't who she said she was. So I made a decision: no more giving her the benefit of the doubt, no more staying silent. If there was truth hiding behind her fancy smile, I was going to find it, and when I did, I'd make sure the whole world saw it too. Because a mother's job doesn't end when her child grows up. Sometimes it just gets quieter and far more dangerous. By the time the rehearsal dinner rolled around, the Arizona sky had turned the color of honey, that soft golden hour where even the desert looks tender. It was held at the Desert Ridge Country Club, one of those places where the air smells like money and the chandeliers sparkle like they are showing off. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a good 10 minutes before going inside. The place looked like something out of a magazine. Waiters in crisp white shirts, music floating through the glass windows, laughter spilling from the patio. From a distance, it all looked perfect. But, child, sometimes perfection has a pulse, the kind that beats too fast, trying to hide the truth underneath. That night, I wasn't just a mother attending a wedding rehearsal. I was a woman standing at the crossroads of patience and pride. I could still hear my sponsor Jerry's voice in my head, the man who'd guided me through recovery all those years ago. He used to say, "Maggie, the hardest part of staying clean ain't saying no to a drink, it's saying no to letting people treat you like you're less than." And sitting there, watching the lights of that country club flicker in my windshield, I knew this was one of those moments. I could either shrink back and let that girl's cruelty define me, or I could walk in there with my head high, knowing exactly who I was, a woman who'd climbed out of the dark with her own 2 hands. So I straightened my dress, fixed my lipstick, and stepped out of the car. Inside, everything sparkled: gold table settings, soft music, polished marble floors, and there they were, gathered near the entrance, Stephanie's family. They looked like a painting come to life. Her so-called father, Richard, tall and silver-haired, wearing a suit so crisp you could slice bread on it. Her mother, Margaret, all pearls and perfume, her laughter just a touch too loud. The aunts and uncle mingled nearby, shaking hands, smiling for photos, each one perfectly styled, perfectly rehearsed, and that's exactly what it felt like, a rehearsal, not just for a wedding, but for their entire story. Something about the way they stood stiff, coordinated, like they were waiting for a director to yell action, made the hairs on my neck prickle. I'd met plenty of wealthy folks in my life through the recovery center. Doctors, lawyers, businessmen, and real money always carried itself quietly. These people, they were performing it, but they were good, I'll give them that. The father smiled and shook my hand. "Mrs. Brown, what a pleasure," he said in that buttery voice actors practice in mirrors. "We've heard so much about you." "I'm sure you have," I replied softly. "Nice to meet you at last." Behind me, I could feel the weight of their eyes sizing me up like I'd wandered into the wrong room, and maybe that's how they saw me, a simple woman in a department store dress, standing under chandeliers that cost more than my first car. But I didn't flinch, not once. Tommy came over then, his face beaming. "Mom, you made it." He hugged me, and for a brief moment all that tension melted. My baby boy, so proud, so in love, I wouldn't miss it. I told him, "You look handsome, sweetheart." And he did, all cleaned up and glowing, like the man I'd always prayed he'd become. Stephanie swept over next, draped in silk and smiles. "Mrs. Brown," she said smoothly, "so glad you could come. I wouldn't dream of missing my own son's wedding." I replied, my smile matching hers, polite, but not soft. "Well," she said, that sugary tone sliding in, "I know you'll love the seating arrangement. We tried to make everyone comfortable." Comfortable, I repeated, the word heavy on my tongue. "That's kind of you." And she smiled wider because, of course, she knew exactly where she'd placed me. Table 12, near the service door, out of sight, out of mind. Dinner began, and everyone seemed to shimmer under the low lights, talking, laughing, sipping champagne. But I watched them closely, every detail, the way her father avoided specifics when talking about his real estate ventures, the way her mother's jewelry still had that new store shine, not the soft patina of heirlooms. And I thought, they've memorized their lines all right, but one of them's bound to forget the script. I barely touched my food. My mind was running faster than my fork. Every instinct in me, every lesson I'd learned from rebuilding my life told me that something here wasn't just odd. It was wrong. When dessert came, I slipped outside for a moment, needing air. The desert night was quiet, the moon full and pale. I leaned against the railing, closed my eyes, and whispered, "Jerry, I hear you, old friend. Don't let them make me small." And just like that, the fear left me. I decided right then I wasn't going to stay silent anymore, not out of anger, not to embarrass anyone, but because silence lets people like Stephanie think they can get away with treating others like dirt beneath their shoes. And if she was about to walk down that aisle carrying a mountain of lies, well, I wasn't about to let my son get buried under it with her. So I walked back inside, head high, smile steady, and for the first time that night, I wasn't nervous. I was ready because I knew before this wedding was over, the truth was going to have its turn to speak. Sometimes, child, truth doesn't knock politely, it comes crashing through the door when you least expect it. And that's exactly what happened that night after the rehearsal dinner. The moon was hanging low, a soft white coin against the desert sky. I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of the Desert Ridge Country Club, hands gripping the steering wheel, my heart still pounding from the evening's performance, because that's what it had been, a performance. Every smile, every handshake, every dainty sip of champagne. I'd watched them all, Stephanie's so-called family, move like trained dancers, polished but unnatural. They were too perfect, too polite. Too rehearsed. I remember whispering to myself, Lord, what am I looking at? And right then my phone buzzed. It was Sarah Williams, my business partner and my dearest friend, the kind of woman you thank God for sending into your life. She's sharp as a tack, steady as stone, and honest enough to tell you when you're being a fool. The message on the screen said, Margaret, I found something. Call me now. Urgent. My stomach twisted. I'd asked Sarah for help weeks earlier, when my suspicions about Stephanie's family started to grow roots. She'd promised to dig quietly, using her medical and business connections in California, but deep down, I don't think I was ready for what she might find. I hit call. She answered before the first ring finished. Margaret, she said, voice low and serious, are you somewhere private? I'm sitting in my car. I said softly, what's wrong? Everything, she breathed, and you were right to be suspicious. That girl, her family, they're not who they say they are. The world seemed to tilt a little. Meaning what? Sarah hesitated, and that hesitation told me more than any words could. Meaning, she said finally, they don't exist, not as a real family, not in any record, any registry, any database. Their company, Hartwell Properties, it's fake. Their estate in California doesn't exist. The family photos all digitally altered. I pressed a hand to my chest. So who are they? Her voice dropped even lower. Actors, Margaret, hired actors. For a moment I couldn't even breathe. The desert outside my car window looked still, too still. Actors, I repeated, barely whispering the word. Yes, from a casting agency in Los Angeles called Prestige Acting Solutions. She shuffled papers on her end, the sound of truth catching up. I have copies of their contracts. They were all hired 3 months ago, right before you first met Stephanie. They're being paid $1,500 a day each. I closed my eyes and leaned my head against the steering wheel. My lord, Sarah continued, her tone calm but grim, they were hired to portray a wealthy California family for personal and social purposes. There are rehearsal schedules, background stories, even scripts on what to say if questioned about business details. They rehearsed being her family. I said, my voice trembling between disbelief and fury. They rehearsed being her life. Sarah replied quietly, everything she told you, told your son, it's all fabricated. Her family's wealth, their real estate business, her upbringing, all fiction. The payments come from a shell company under her name, S. Morrison Financial Services, S. Morrison, Stephanie Morrison. The name hit me like a slap. I sat there for a long second, the phone still pressed to my ear, staring at nothing but my own reflection in the windshield. For months, that woman had been calling me loque, last belittling my recovery, acting like I was something to be ashamed of. And now here it was, the truth laid bare. She wasn't just snobbish, she was a liar. A liar who'd built a castle out of borrowed bricks and expected the rest of us to bow at the gates. Sarah's voice softened. Margaret, are you all right? I swallowed hard. No, I said, but I'm clear. Listen. She continued, I'll send you everything I've got, the contracts, the invoices, the agency records. You need to be careful how you handle this. Your son deserves to know, but timing matters. I understand, I said. Good, because this isn't just about deception. There's more here, something about her finances that doesn't add up. I'll keep digging. We said our good nights, but I didn't drive home right away. I just sat there in the stillness of the night, my hands trembling, my mind racing. The truth has a strange weight. Child, it's heavy, but it also sets you free. I thought about Tommy, my sweet boy, who believed he'd found love. How could I tell him that the woman he was about to marry wasn't real? How do you explain that the family he'd been so eager to impress didn't even exist? And yet I knew I had to, because if recovery taught me anything, it's that secrets rot everything they touch. So I took a deep breath, started my car, and whispered into the darkness, "All right, Lord, if this is my test, give me the strength to walk through it with grace." Then I drove home calm on the outside, shaking on the inside, knowing that tomorrow I wouldn't just be a mother at a wedding. I'd be the woman standing between her son and a lie dressed in white. You learn a lot about people when they think you're not watching, and you learn even more when you are but pretend you're not. The night after Sarah's phone call, I hardly slept. My mind kept replaying every little detail I'd seen, every fake smile, every awkward pause, every too polished thank you. Now that I knew the truth that Stephanie's so-called family were hired actors, I saw everything differently. And I made a decision. I wouldn't storm in swinging, no yelling, no name calling. I'd let them show who they really were in their own words. So when Tommy invited me to another wedding dinner at the country club, I said yes. "Of course, darling," I told him sweetly. "It'll be lovely to spend more time with your future in-laws." He smiled, not knowing what I knew. The restaurant's private dining room looked like something from a movie, crystal glasses, soft jazz, candles flickering low. The Hartwells were already seated when I arrived, laughing too loudly, like people who needed the noise to fill the gaps in their story. Mrs. Brown boomed the father, Richard, standing to shake my hand. His smile was perfect, too perfect. "So glad you could join us." "Oh, thank you," I said, smiling back. "You must be exhausted from all your travels. Tommy tells me your company's been developing properties all along the coast." His eyes flickered just for a second. "Ah, yes, yes, of course. We're expanding in several regions." "Oh, how nice," I said gently, folding my napkin on my lap. "Which projects are you most proud of? I've always admired a man who builds something lasting." He blinked, then looked down at his plate, clearly buying time. "Oh, well, you know how it is, so many, it's hard to pick." "Of course," I said, keeping my tone warm and innocent, "but surely one must stand out. A signature property, perhaps." He cleared his throat. The Ridgeview complex in Monterey." "Oh, how interesting," I replied with a small smile. "My nephew's firm handled the zoning for Monterey last year. Strange, I don't recall hearing of Ridgeview. What's it near?" A silence. He dabbed his forehead with his napkin. "Near the ocean." "Well, I should hope so," I said sweetly. "Otherwise the sea view must be dreadful." Stephanie shot him a sharp look, and I saw her hand clench around her wine glass. The mother, Margaret, swooped in to rescue him, patting his arm. "Oh, Richard, you and your memory. He's been traveling too much lately," she said, forcing a laugh. "Anyway, Mrs. Brown, I just love your necklace. So unique." I looked down at my modest silver pendant, the one my sponsor gave me after my 10th year sober. "Thank you," I said softly. "It's not much, but it means the world to me. Yours, though that's a lovely piece. A family heirloom, I assume." Her hand froze midair. "Yes," she said quickly, "my grandmother's. It's been in our family for generations." "Oh, how precious," I said. "May I?" I leaned forward, pretending to admire the jewels, and that's when I saw it. A tiny Tiffany & Co. engraving glinting near the clasp, and not just any Tiffany piece. I'd seen it in their new catalog the week before. I smiled. Your grandmother had excellent taste and impeccable timing. Tiffany's new collection just came out this spring. She went pale. "Oh, well, yes, it's been restrung," she stammered. "Ah," I nodded. "Modern restoration, I understand completely." Across the table, the uncle and aunt had been quietly sipping wine, but now I turned to them, my tone as light as a feather. "And how was your trip from the Hamptons? Must have been quite the change coming to the desert heat." The uncle smiled nervously. "Oh yes, quite the drive." I tilted my head. "Drive? I thought you said earlier you flew in from LAX." He blinked. "Ah, well, yes, we flew, then drove from there. From Los Angeles to Arizona, in this heat, you poor things," I said kindly. "You must have needed a bottle or two of wine after that." The aunt chuckled nervously. "Oh, we don't drink, dear." Her husband looked startled. "We don't." Her elbow shot into his ribs under the table. "No, darling, of course not." I smiled, stirring my coffee slowly. "Well," I said at last, It's lovely to see such a close-knit family. You finish each other's sentences, just not the same ones." The silence that followed could have frozen the desert. Stephanie was glaring at me now, the smile gone, her jaw tight. "Mrs. Brown," she said, voice clipped, "perhaps we could avoid interrogating my family over dinner." I set down my cup gently. "Oh, I didn't mean to interrogate anyone, dear. I'm just getting to know them as any mother would before entrusting her son to another family." Her eyes narrowed. "You're overstepping, maybe," I said softly, "but sometimes the truth needs someone willing to step over a line." And with that, I leaned back in my chair, calm and collected, while the Hartwells fidgeted like schoolchildren caught cheating on a test. No shouting, no drama, just silence, the kind that only truth can bring. You can always tell when a storm's about to break. The air gets heavy, still like the world's holding its breath. And sitting at that dinner table, watching Stephanie's smile stretch thinner and thinner, I knew it was coming. She'd spent months perfecting her act, the sweet bride to be, polished and untouchable, but lies are like silk dresses, child. They look smooth until the first tear appears, and once that fabric starts to rip, no amount of fancy stitching can hide it. After I'd politely questioned her family, the table went quiet. You could almost hear the clink of nerves rattling in their glasses. The fake father had turned pale, the fake mother was pretending to text someone on her phone, and the uncle and aunt were exchanging panicked looks like two actors who'd forgotten their lines. Tommy, poor thing, didn't understand what was happening. He was still chatting away, trying to fill the silence, talking about honeymoon plans and flowers. Bless his heart, he thought everyone had just eaten too much. But Stephanie, oh, that girl was a different story. Her smile had turned into something tight and trembling, and her hands were gripping her napkin so hard the fabric was twisting in knots. Finally, she set it down, folded it carefully, and looked straight at me. "Mrs. Brown," she said sweetly, too sweetly, "may I have a word?" I smiled, calm as ever. "Of course, dear." She rose from her chair and gestured toward the hallway. "Privately." I followed her out into the corridor, where the soft music from the dining room faded behind us. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor, every step like a match striking in the dark. When she turned around, the mask dropped. Her eyes, those careful, camera-ready eyes, were burning now, all pretense gone. "What exactly are you trying to do?" she hissed. I blinked slowly. "I'm not sure I understand, dear." "Oh, don't play innocent," she snapped. "You've been undermining me all evening. The questions, the comments you think I didn't notice. You're trying to make me look stupid in front of my family." I tilted my head. "Your family seems quite capable of doing that on their own." Her face went red. "Excuse me, I simply asked about their work, their travels, their heirlooms." I said gently, "Normal things for a future in-law to ask. If that makes them uncomfortable, perhaps there's a reason." "You're unbelievable," she spat. "You've been suspicious of me from the beginning, always looking at me like I'm some kind of fraud. Now I could have denied it. I could have smoothed things over, told her she was imagining things. But I'd reached a point in life where lying for peace wasn't peace at all, it was just surrender. So I said, if the shoe fits, Stephanie, maybe it's time to ask yourself why." That did it. Her voice rose, echoing down the hall. "You're jealous," she shouted. "That's what this is about, isn't it? You can't stand that your son finally found someone from a higher class. You resent that I come from money, that I have taste, that I'm not like you, some recovering addict from a trailer park." Her words hit the air like stones, sharp and heavy. A waiter passing by froze in place, pretending not to hear. I stood there quietly, letting her throw every insult she'd been holding back for months. Because sometimes silence is more powerful than shouting. When she finally stopped to catch her breath, I spoke soft, steady, and low. "Jealousy, dear, is wanting what someone else has. I don't want your kind of life." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. "You see," I continued, "I've had pain, yes. I've fallen lower than you can imagine. But I got up. I built something real with honesty, hard work, and faith. You, on the other hand." I looked her straight in the eye. "You've built everything on sand, and the tide's coming in." Her face crumpled not with remorse, but with rage. You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Oh, I think I do," I said quietly. "A frightened girl who's forgotten that class isn't about money or manners, it's about character." She took a shaky breath, her eyes darting toward the dining room. "You'll regret this." I smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I can live with regret. Can you live with truth?" And then I walked back toward the table, calm as the desert moon outside. Behind me, I heard her heels clicking fast and furious, each one an angry heartbeat echoing down the hall. When I returned, the fake family was whispering nervously, glancing toward the door. A moment later, Stephanie swept back in, wearing that forced smile again, the one that didn't reach her eyes. "Well," she said loudly, "what a lovely evening, everyone. Let's call it a night, shall we?" Her voice was bright, brittle like glass just before it shatters. The dinner ended awkwardly with half-hearted goodbyes and clinking dishes. I could feel the tension thick in the air, the kind that makes people rush to their cars without looking back. And as I walked out under the Arizona night sky, I thought to myself, she's not just angry. She's terrified, because arrogance is always loudest right before it breaks. And oh, that girl's pride was cracking piece by piece. Child, nothing in this world cuts deeper than the moment your own child looks at you like you're the enemy. Not because you've done them wrong, but because they can't see the danger you're trying to save them from. That night, after Stephanie's outburst, I thought the worst was over. I figured she'd simmer down, spin some excuse, and the whole mess would blow over quietly. But pride never stays quiet long, and that girl's pride was louder than a church bell on Sunday. It didn't take long before Tommy called me. His voice was sharp, the kind that trembles not from anger, but from hurt that's been twisted into something mean. "Dad," he said, short, clipped, no warmth. "We need to talk, now." I could hear the storm in his voice before I even pulled into his driveway. When I stepped inside his apartment, he was pacing, shoulders tense, eyes red, like he hadn't slept. Stephanie wasn't there, but I could feel her shadow in the room. Her perfume still hung in the air, too sweet, too strong. He turned on me the second the door clicked shut. "What did you say to her?" I took a slow breath. "I told her the truth, the truth." His voice cracked. "You embarrassed her in front of her whole family. You accused her father of lying." I looked at him carefully. "I didn't accuse anyone, son. I asked simple questions, the kind any parent would ask before handing their child over to someone else's care." He threw his hands up. "You don't hand me over to anyone. I'm not a child, Dad. I'm marrying her because I love her." I nodded softly. "And I love you, which is why I can't just sit back and pretend I don't see what's plain as day." He glared at me like I'd just cursed. "You're judging her. You've been judging her from the start. Just because she's from a different world, because she's successful, because—" I cut in gently. "Because nothing about her story adds up, Tommy. You know me, I don't care about money or class, but I care about honesty, and that girl's swimming in secrets." He shook his head, pacing again. "You're impossible. You think everyone's hiding something because you've spent your whole life around addicts and liars. Not everyone's like that. That one stung, but I didn't let it show. I was an addict," I said quietly. "I know what it means to live with shame and lies. That's how I recognize it when I see it. It's not the perfume or the diamonds that bother me, it's the fear underneath all that shine." He stopped pacing then, his jaw clenched, his eyes wet. "You think you know her better than I do. No," I said softly. "I think I know what truth feels like, and I haven't felt it around her once." He ran a hand through his hair, voice breaking. "You always do this, Dad. You always find something wrong with the people I care about, Tommy." I whispered, stepping closer. "I just want you safe." "I am safe," he shouted. "You're the one who can't move on. You can't stand that someone actually wants to marry me, build a life with me." I closed my eyes for a moment. There's a kind of pain that doesn't come with tears, just quiet, heavy, the kind that settles deep in the bones. When I opened them again, I said, "Son, secrets are like mold. They grow best in the dark, and that woman's been keeping a whole house full of them. I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying it because I've been there. I've lived in lies so long I forgot what daylight looked like, and I'll be damned if I let you walk into the same darkness." He stared at me, breathing hard. Then, in a voice so small it almost broke me, he said, "You just can't be happy for me, can you?" That was the knife. The final twist. I swallowed hard. "I want to be happy for you, Tommy, but I can't be happy for a lie. And one day soon, you'll see what I see, and when that happens, I'll be right here, waiting to help you pick up the pieces." He turned away, shoulders shaking. "Please," he whispered, "just stay out of it. Don't come tomorrow. Don't make a scene. Tomorrow, the wedding." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The boy I'd held through sleepless nights, the one I'd carried through my worst days, was looking at me like a stranger. Finally, I said, "All right, son, if that's what you want." He didn't answer, just kept his back turned as I walked out. The desert night was cool against my skin, but inside I burned with love, with fear, with helplessness. You see, sometimes doing the right thing doesn't feel like victory. It feels like loss, because love, real love, isn't about winning, it's about holding the line, even when it costs you everything. And that night, as I drove home under a moon that looked far too calm for my aching heart, I whispered the same prayer I'd said for 12 years straight. "Lord, don't let my son learn the hard way what truth costs, but if he must, give me the strength to stand beside him when he does." There's a certain kind of silence that only comes after heartbreak, not loud or dramatic, just hollow. That was the kind of quiet that filled my house the night after Tommy told me not to come to the wedding. The desert was still outside, the air cool, the moon hanging over the cactus like a silver coin. Inside, I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd once prayed for sobriety, for strength, for second chances. Only this time I was praying for truth. My phone sat face down beside a half-cold cup of coffee. I didn't expect to hear from anyone, but as I was about to go to bed, it buzzed once, then twice, 2 calls. One from Sarah Williams and the other from Frank Davis, the private investigator she'd hired to dig deeper. Something in my chest tightened. I picked up Sarah's call first. "Margaret," she said without preamble, her voice low and serious, "you'd better sit down." I smiled faintly. "I'm already sitting, sweetheart. What have you got?" "Well," she sighed, "remember those contracts I mentioned? The ones from that casting agency in Los Angeles?" "Yes." "They were real and worse than we thought. I have the receipts now, bank transfers and all. Stephanie's been paying 5 people, the entire so-called Hartwell family, $1,500 a day, not per week, per day, and she's been doing it for 3 months. My stomach twisted. 3 months. That's right, she said grimly. Every dinner, every brunch, every fake phone call about business deals, all of it rehearsed. They signed non-disclosure agreements. Even their social media pages were manufactured to match the illusion. I rubbed my temples trying to make sense of it, and the money, coming from her shell company, S. Morrison Financial Services, but that account's empty now, every cent's gone, either spent or hidden. I closed my eyes. So everything was fake, every single thing. Sarah's voice softened. "I wish I could say otherwise, Maggie, but yes, she's not who she says she is." I stayed quiet, letting the words settle in my bones. Fake families, fake fortunes, but the part that hurt most wasn't the lie itself. It was that my boy had believed it. He'd built his heart on something that never existed. Then Sarah's tone changed, sharper now. "And there's something else. Frank found more. I told him to call you directly. He's got the medical side of things." As if on cue, my phone buzzed again. I thanked her softly and answered the second call. "Frank." "Yes, ma'am," came a gravelly voice, polite but firm. "Dr. Williams filled me in on what you're dealing with. I've done the digging you asked for." I braced myself. "Go ahead." "Well," he said, clearing his throat, "your future daughter-in-law's been what we call doctor shopping. She's got prescriptions under 3 different names, 2 in California, 1 here in Arizona. Oxycodone, Adderall, Xanax. She's been filling them at different pharmacies to avoid detection. I've got the logs to prove it." My breath caught. "You're certain?" "As certain as the paper in front of me." He said, "She's seeing 4 doctors. All of them believe she's a legitimate patient. She's been using false employer information too. Said she worked for a marketing firm that doesn't exist." I pressed my fingers to my lips. "Oh, Lord, there's more," he said gently. "One of the pharmacies reported her last month for suspicious behavior trying to refill early. She claimed her medication was stolen. It's only a matter of time before the authorities start asking questions. I didn't speak for a long while. The ticking of my kitchen clock was the only sound between us. Finally, I said quietly, "Thank you, Mr. Davis. You've done more than I hoped." "I'm sorry, ma'am," he replied. "I know this ain't easy. No," I whispered, "but it's necessary." When the call ended, I sat there alone again, the silence heavier now, but clearer somehow, the kind of silence that comes after a storm when the dust has settled and you finally see the damage for what it is. I looked down at my hands, the same hands that had once trembled pouring liquor, the same ones that had later steadied over 12 years of sobriety, and I realized something. I wasn't just fighting for my pride anymore. I was fighting for my son's life, his heart, his future, his peace, because addiction doesn't always come wrapped in a bottle. Sometimes it wears diamonds and designer dresses. Sometimes it smiles and says, "Trust me." And now all the lies were out in the open. The family was fake. The weed